Thank you, Julian, for the setup of the interconnected funding system. That's exactly something that Hypercerts wants to contribute to. And today I will briefly talk about Hypercerts, but then I want to introduce to you Hyperboards, which is something like a collection of Hypercerts, and we think unlocks the potential of Hypercerts quite a bit. And also, since it is the end of the day, if you in between have a question or something, feel free to interrupt me and ask a question. We can make this a little bit more interactive than just a talk, so feel free to raise your hand in between. All right, so starting a little bit with Hypercerts. So Hypercerts, question for the audience, who knows what a Hypercert is? Nice, all right. We also have actually the devs in the room who have developed Hypercerts. So if you have technical questions, I can point you to the person to talk to about the technical aspects. On the conceptual level, what a Hypercert is, it is something like an impact certificate and a specific implementation of an impact certificate. It accounts for the action that had or will have positive impact. And we want to account for that. We basically build a contribution graph with Hypercerts of those things that are positive or expected to be positive. And on the very basic level, we basically just say who did what when. So the basic data fields, the set of contributors, scope of work, time of work. And an example is a Hypercert for funding the commons. Here it is for the Paris edition, where the set of contributors, David, Teresa, and Anna. I mean, there were more people involved, but just as an example, the scope of work was funding the commons in Paris, and then the time of work. And we basically have this now as an artifact that the contributors themselves mint in order to have a digital twin of the physical work, which then they can use in the online world. So technically, it's an extension of the ERC 1155 and backward compatible. So it is also, you can find it on OpenSea, etc. And what it really does is it makes impact claims identifiable, traceable, and transferable to have that online, and it's something that is not that easy if you just have it physically. So this is kind of the additional digital layer on your physical contribution to providing positive impact. What has happened so far, this was a project that was started at Funding the Commons in New York last year. And since then, we launched on Gurley on testnet in the fall. We launched on Optimism mainnet in February in order to have a pilot with Gitcoin. So all Gitcoin projects can now kind of, for their project, create a Hypercert and distribute it to all their funders to recognize them as part of the impact that they create. We had a pilot with the pop-up city Zuzalu and collected about 20 ETH in retrospective funding for Zuzalu. We released an SDK so that other people can use Hypercerts and build on top of this. And we piloted with Funding the Commons in Paris, but also we continue this, and we continue this with basically the Hyperboards that I will introduce soon. One slide in between us and the Hyperboards. So the Hypercerts ecosystem. On the bottom layer, we have the Hypercerts protocol to kind of track the contributions to positive impact. Then on top of that, we want to build multiple tools. We want to build evaluations and attestation. We can think of drips and dynamic art that all kind of extends the usefulness and how Hypercerts can be built. On top of that, we have different applications and integrations, and applications that will be a Hyperboard, for example, but also integrations is something where, as Julian said, we don't want to just like build another silo next to everything else. We want to build interconnected funding systems, and that's why we have this integration with Gitcoin, so that we connect different ecosystems, and we would love if other funding system, Optimism, RetroPGF, would also use Hypercerts, because then Hypercerts would be the connecting layer, the connecting data layer between Gitcoin and Optimism's RetroPGF, because all the funders are recognized through the same mechanism. And then on top of that are, of course, use cases. So use cases can be open source software, AI safety, longevity research, and so many others. And the exciting thing here is that we actually have talked with people about all of these use cases where they think they want to use Hypercerts and they think it's useful. So there's a lot of excitement to use Hypercerts for real-world use cases and build the application and integration that are necessary to do that. All right, that's two examples. Just a couple of days ago, Kevin posted this about connecting kind of the Greenpill network, Gitcoin, and Hypercerts, because he is involved in all three of the projects. And I think this is kind of exactly what we want to do with Hypercerts, that we connect different things. And then Gainforest, amazing project that works in the environmental sector. They have used impact certificates before, and now they actually want to implement Hypercerts to basically also advance this and contribute to this standard that we want to set here, so to make it also interoperable for their funders. We just started also like a new site on the website, so if you also want to or are already building on top of Hypercerts, please go there and submit your project. We want to know about you. So then we can also show the whole ecosystem who is building on top of Hypercerts. All right, so Hyperboards, as I said, is basically here a new tool for Hypercerts. And then the Hypersponsor is one application for conferences and community events that uses Hyperboards. All right, let's see if we can actually demo this. So this is a Hyperboard for this conference. So basically on the left side, what we see are the sponsors that actually had the financial contributions to make this conference happen. So, and this is kind of the recognition of the conference sponsors. But then we also have non-financial contributions. So these are speakers, facilitators, volunteers that we can also put on the Hyperboard. So a Hyperboard, that way, is like a collection of Hypercerts, but it's also a visualization to recognize who contributes to community events, who makes the value that we produce here actually happen. And so this is basically, in the back end, this is one giant Hypercert that is then kind of owned by these different sponsors. And these are all individual Hypercerts because every speaker basically mints their own Hypercert for their talk. And so in the beginning, when we basically start kind of a conference, then Finally Commons owns all of this Hypercert. So no sponsor has yet committed to sponsoring it. And what we can do with this is we can streamline the sponsorship experience. So if we basically go to the store, let's see if this works, and we are connected with a wallet. And Julian, if I may, I pretend to be Octant for a second. And Octant now buys around 18% of this Hypercert. And this is all on testnet, so that's why I think it's okay if I pretend to be Octant. All right, I did that. It said it was successful. So let's go back to the board. Let's see if it actually works. There's Octant. So basically, Octant was now added to the board as a sponsor. It has like 17%, and we are actually working on that. They are not vertical, but always horizontal, in order to actually maximize kind of also like the space where the logo is shown. And we have a question from the audience. Yes.
Would Octant have to do that themselves, or could you, as an event organizer?
Both ways. So ideally, when we want to streamline it, I think it would be at some point the easiest if the sponsors are basically just actually buying the Hypercert online. You have the transaction there, it appears there. I don't think we are there yet. So in that way, the Commons basically can say, okay, I got a normal sponsorship agreement, and now I transfer this part of the Hypercert to Octant for their funding that I got through the other channels that are used already today. Cool. So that actually worked. Nice. And it's actually the same thing with the speakers. So the speakers, every speaker should mint their own hypercert. But this can be made much easier from the conference organizer side. So the conference organizer has the list of everyone, has collected a picture already that is just sent to the speaker, and it's basically a one-click experience for the speaker to then mint the hypercert and be added to the hyperboard. And so yeah, and then if I would do that for all of them, then we would end up with this, where all the different sponsors are on. Cool. Can we get this larger again? How am I doing on time? I'm the last speaker, so I can talk for 10 hours. Okay, cool. 10 minutes, all right. Cool, so a little bit about the data structure in the background. So we have the hyperboard here, and I said this was one hypercert that was then owned by the different sponsors, but then we have another hyperboard that contains all the different speakers. So we have basically a composable hyperboard with different hyperboards nested in another one, and we can basically do that in a lot of different ways. So we can also then use this hypercert from the sponsors to combine with the sponsor hypercert from Paris and from New York to have an overall hypercert for funding the commons. And this is basically what we then can implement, embed in the Funding the Commons website and also on the event websites. So this is basically what we where we think that a hyperboard streamlines this for all conferences and then makes this just much easier, and we create actually value for sponsors and conference organizers. All right, so what I showed you was the event view, the hyperboard for one event. Then I also introduced the sponsorship view, so over all sponsors from Funding the Commons, but we can also flip it around a little bit and say, okay, now we actually are interested in all the things that Octant actually funded. And so we can have a hyperboard where Octant is displaying all the cool projects that they have funded, and ultimately when the projects are then connected with the evaluations, then we can see what Octant actually kind of created with their contributions. And we have some kind of recognition for this that can also be implemented on the Octant website. And so that I use Octant as an example here all the time. And then if you're a speaker, you can also use this in order to have a portfolio view of your speaking engagements. Sorry. So you can use this as a speaker to show where you have spoken, and with the evaluations again, you can also show that actually people, the community, liked your talks. So this is basically, I talked a little bit already about this, the application of Hyperboards for the hypersponsor. And then we think of this, or you can think of this as a billboard, a digital advertisements board that you, with purchasing a hypercert, you purchase the right to display something here. And when I say something, that's the nice thing that you can change that whenever you want to. So you have an announcement to make, you change that picture, and on all the hyperboards across the events that you sponsored, this will change. And then what we want to do is we want to increase the interaction with the hyperboard. So whenever you interact with this, the sponsors are shown, so you have an increased visibility, you have an increased positive association with this brand. So I've talked a lot about the left side. Now also let's talk about the right side. The right side really gives recognition to the non-financial contributions, and I think this is just as important than the financial side. I have also introduced a little bit of the evaluations already. So if we would now have a survey where we basically ask, what were your top experiences at Funding the Commons in Berlin? Then we could recognize those people who actually created these experiences with increasing the size of their tiles. And so this is then a mechanism to really recognize those who created the really nice experiences and create an incentive then to innovate. But also on top of that, we can have retrospective funding that adds to the visual recognition, also financial element if you want to. Yes?
What about specialized sources of contributions, event insurance providers, event venue providers that are offering some sort of material in kind contribution? How's that treated? And how's do you have a
non-Web3 people?
or do you have a CPA view, for instance, an accountant view, or treasury view?
Yeah, so I think from the tool set, this is flexible to accommodate whatever you want to build in that. So you can have like multiple nested hyperboards for whatever you think like, oh, there should be a contribution for volunteering, and you want to recognize everybody who volunteered. I just put, for simplicity, just the speakers on here and the sponsors, but there are many other people involved, and you can kind of recognize all of that. But the Hyperboard itself and Hypercerts is agnostic towards that, because we are not the ones telling everybody what should be valued, but it should come bottom up. So, and that is, I think, a big difference to other mechanisms where we are not saying what's valuable. That's what should be evaluated in the community. The community needs to agree on this. And then I think there was basically a second question about like non-Web3 people. I think in order to really adopt this, we also need to have like a Web2 interface to interact with this. But in the background, we want to have kind of the Web3 technology that you are not dependent on one platform.
But like, if there was a non-Web3 sponsor who didn't have a wallet, would they still be able to be on this?
So in that case, we probably would we plan to build a platform where that funder could like log in as like any Web2 platform, and there they would see kind of their contribution, can interact with that, can manage that. But if they at any point decide, okay, I actually understand Web3 now, I want to take my Hypercerts and like have that just in my wallet, then they can.
I was thinking of a use case where then you may be, for instance, incapable of having a wallet if it's a governmental entity that's offering a venue or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So there are those use cases as well. And I think we will start with crypto conferences because this is the easiest case to adopt. But then we want to venture out of that and show like why this is a better thing, an easier way, more standardized way to do this. And then also, it's then also a tool to get people into Web3 if they see why it's valuable to actually own this, and no central entity can take away that you own this Hypercert. All right, I think this is, like I talked a little bit about this already, so it's like the Hypersponsor, how it works. It's really, you have the registry where you can buy things, that was in the demo. You have the dynamic Hyperboards, and you have retroactive funds where you can reward the contributions, but also what this does is gives us a better databases about what the community actually liked, and with that we can like align the incentives between the community and the sponsors so that the organizers are actually innovating in whatever the community actually valued the most. All right, and I'm closing with Hypercerts and Hyperboards are new internet objects. What I mean with this is really like I presented this with the conference and sponsorship and community events use case, but Hypercerts, the attribution, the contribution, like how we map kind of the contributions, and then how we use that, how we display that, that can be used in many different cases. So if you think of a project, if you think of Gitcoin projects, if you want to kind of aggregate what you do, all of that is possible not only for sponsorship and conferences, but beyond that, and that's why we think that this is basically the database can be something like, when you think of GitHub, like a GitHub for Hypercerts and Hyperboards is basically what we have in mind with this, that kind of displays this kind of nested tree structure. All right, and then this has been a very collaborative effort from the start. There are some of the contributors, and then the invitation to build with us, or if you want to use Hyperboards, talk to us, send us an email, and also very interested in hearing your feedback after the talk. Thank you.